All right, what's up, everyone? It's Zach, and I'm joined today with Dylan Elgas. Dylan, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing, Zach?
Good, glad to hear it. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking, and thanks for stopping by today.
Of course. I appreciate the invite here. I'm really excited to do this.
Yeah, of course. So Dylan is a certified personal trainer, coach, and kind of like the health, wellness, and physical activity portion of coaching. But Dylan, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your experience, what you do?
Okay, so yeah, as Zach said, I am a coach or a personal trainer. I prefer the term coach though. And I first dabbled into this industry with exercise, started training and figuring out things for myself. And I had a lot of people asking me for advice. So I just went from there and figured out, maybe I should look into doing this a little bit more seriously. From there, it kind of snowballs. You start to realize what you put in your body makes you perform a different way. So then I started paying attention to the nutrition, and then uh, the sleep comes along with that. You start realizing that it really helps. My workouts seem a lot better when I get some nice quality sleep in the next day. So I started focusing on recovery, and then from there I kind of built it all together into now I'm just a coach who I'm going to talk to you about every aspect of your life, whether it's what you're putting in each day, how you're moving each day, or what you're doing between your training sessions and whatnot.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, I think that you bring up so many good points there that there's so many aspects towards, your health, whether that is recovery or what you eat. It's not just like going to the gym and lifting some weights that are going to give you the results to fuel your body or to, get stronger.
Right, right. No, definitely, definitely. That was actually one of my favorite things that I've heard. Name is Larry Geyer. Once said the only reason we work out is to create the opportunity to recover.
Mm.
And I think that that is a very missed missed point there because a lot, like you said, a lot of us, we just think as exercise as its own entity, and when we're at the gym we think we're making a lot of these changes, but those changes really don't take effect until you go to sleep that night. So if you're not really sleeping that night, or you go out and you party, you throw some beers back and stuff like that, and then you don't really sleep all that well, chances are your recovery is not going to be all that great, and you're not going to see a lot of the results that you're trying to get from your training sessions.
Definitely. And, I think about maybe people, our age or just anyone that's trying to work out and, they might spend a good hour really intense workout in the gym, but then they are doing those things that you mentioned, maybe, going out and partying, staying up late, not really balancing recovery and sleep. And then they're like, what the heck? Why aren't I getting the results? Or, I'm still eating, fast food all the time, but I'm working out, right? Like I'm running 5 miles a day. Why aren't I seeing the results?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I'm not saying that, we're not able to enjoy ourselves. We don't need to
Right.
be robotic. Maybe I can be a little bit like that sometimes, but I don't expect that from everyone.
Right.
Um, but it's definitely a balance that we have to
Hmm.
try to gain control of there. And we have to know when is it okay if your goal really is to make these performance changes, or these mobility performance changes in the gym, or whatever it may be, training for a competition or just training to be fit for life, whatever it may be, your goals have to align with your lifestyle, right?
Hmm.
Um, our habits follow our beliefs, and our beliefs are determined by our goals.
Definitely. And I mean, I think, that's a great point. People that are trying to be, a college athlete, their lifestyle, their training regimen is going to differ from someone that's just trying to be able to walk around the block a few times, right? It depends on what you want and the lifestyle that you want to live.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the things that it's really funny that you brought it up, like college athletes, or
Yeah.
even if you go onto the professional level, man, it's really interesting when you look at some of the schedules for these individuals. I mean, talk about robots, man. I was talking about myself could be like that, but everything is down to like a science
Yeah.
almost, to where, if they're, especially if they're training to make it to that next level, um, everything is organized so that their sport is their top priority, right?
Right.
So and it I think it becomes very difficult for the average individual, when we think about our training day like this, right? We think of ourselves as, oh, like I want to train like an athlete, or let's take a movie star, for example. We're going to kind of switch gears.
Yeah.
I think it was really popular, and maybe you might remember this, but when like Thor
Hmm.
first came out, like those movies a while back, everyone hopped on Chris Hemsworth,
Yep.
is that his name? Yeah, Chris Hemsworth's like exercise program and nutrition plan. And I mean, he was training for like 2, 3 hours a day and then eating somewhere in like the 6,000s of calories. And I knew people that were like trying to do this program, and I'm like, well, you got to remember, like that's his job, is
Yeah.
to train and eat like that, and unfortunately, whether you're a student or you've gotten your degree or whatever, you're probably working a full-time desk job. Like you don't have the opportunity to to make the changes that someone that's getting paid millions of dollars like that is going to make. You know what I mean? That kind of
Definitely.
makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I mean, that's something that I have conversations with people about and think about, like you see these actors or actresses and they might be, really, really muscular, or they might be really like lean and kind of have that like shredded physique. And people will say like, oh, I want that body type. I want that. And then to achieve it is really hard. And yes, you or I, the average person can achieve it, but the motivation is so different for someone like us than someone that's getting
Mhm.
paid, 10 millions of dollars to get into that shape, right?
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think a great example of that is Christian Bale. I
Oh
don't
my gosh,
know
yeah.
all of the movies that it was for, but I saw like his progressions from like the different movies that he does. I mean, the dude literally like looks like he's starving in one film, and then
Yeah,
almost not even like a year later he's just beefed and bulked up for Batman,
yeah,
it's crazy because like you said, the motivation that's behind these goals is really what's going to lead you to those results. And then
definitely.
obviously the resources they have at their disposal, like training and diet wise, is
Oh yeah,
ridiculous,
definitely.
you
I
know.
mean, if I had someone cooking me all my meals with like perfect, macronutrients, micronutrients, calories, just putting in the
Right.
dishes,
Yeah,
that wouldn't be that
definitely.
hard to follow.
No, no, it wouldn't be. Everything's done for you almost to an extent, and then you just
Right,
got to work hard at it, right? And then that
definitely.
paycheck or that movie is definitely a strong motivator.
Right. Yeah. So Dylan, mentioning kind of Christian Bale, that's a really good example. Someone who he's been seen at both extremes, having that really jacked, physique, but also kind of looking like he hasn't had food in, days. Um,
Hmm.
and he does that for a job. Now, the average person isn't gonna, really do that, but would you say that is even like healthy for our bodies, or is that just, it is what it is?
So we're diving real deep, real quick here. um, it really depends. And I would argue that Christian Bale and someone doing something like that, they're going to be one of those elite level performers. And
Yeah.
now you can think of the elite level performer as like the basketball players in the NCAA championship coming up here, or you could think of it as just like a millionaire movie star who's trying to get ready for their next role, right? These are elite level competitors, and the average individual isn't exactly built for that kind of lifestyle. I don't necessarily know if everyone or anyone really is built for it. That's a different
Right.
conversation. But for the most part, I think that it's not appropriate for people to be fluctuating in their goals
Yeah.
to that level of extreme. Like I guess that would be like the very most intense form of like cutting and bulking someone could do, right? I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that is exactly. I don't think that would be something that's advantageous for people to go through.
Right.
Um, and that makes me bring up a point where that I really like to discuss when it comes to human health and human performance. Um, and this is what I mean by working really deep here now.
Yeah.
So I learned from an individual. His name's Dr. Andrea Ospina, the creator of functional range systems. He came up with this idea of the evolutionary perspective of health,
Okay.
right? And so this discusses the first question. It's a series of three questions that we can almost apply to any health related situation that we arise that comes up in our lives. And the first question there is, what were we as humans naturally selected to do?
Okay.
Right. And so now we're kind of taking a little bit of a dive into evolutionary biology here. And the answer to that question is hunt and gather. And what
Yep.
did hunting and gathering, entail? What did that mean? It
Hmm.
meant on a daily basis, as humans, we were running, sprinting, crawling, walking, climbing, throwing, and doing other, you know, expressions of our movement. And
Right.
the second question for the evolutionary perspective of health is, what are we currently doing as Homo sapiens? What are we
Mm.
currently doing today? And the answer to that question for many people is not hunting and gathering, right?
Right.
Right. And so if we think about it, we've spent, our genome was formed the way that our physical structure looks. This took roughly, over 3 million years
Yeah.
to become the way it is, right? And so in the last, maybe a couple hundred years, we've dramatically changed the way that we live our lifestyle. Um, and we can dive a little bit deeper into that science here in a little bit. But so we're no longer living like hunters and gatherers, right? And
Right.
we're now starting to we're in the digital age currently, so we're doing a lot of movement with our hands, maybe a little bit of movement with the neck, but other than that, there's not a ton of movement variability occurring.
Right.
And the third question, the evolutionary perspective of health, is, what are we doing to compensate for the fact that we are no longer living as hunters and gatherers, or no longer living as we were naturally selected to do?
Right.
And the answer to that question is exercise. But exercise itself has, evolved, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is true statement here, but I think it's reasonable to believe that, when exercise was first invented, we weren't thinking about like bench press and deadlift and
Right.
bodybuilding, and you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
when exercise was first invented, right, it was a compensatory, idea, right?
Yeah.
It was to make up for the fact that we're no longer living as hunters and gatherers, right?
Right.
Um, so again, those three questions for the evolutionary perspective of health, and I think this really kind of sparks the conversation for aligning anyone back to like a really healthy path in their life. The first question, what are we naturally selected to do? Second question, what are we currently doing? And the third question is, what are we doing to compensate for the fact that we're no longer living as we're naturally selected to do so?
Okay. That
Yeah,
that was
like I
really
said, that gets really deep.
it
Yeah,
does. It does, and it's a lot
yeah.
to think about. And I mean, it's something that I've maybe very, very basic scratched the surface of, just like kind of doing self research, but just to kind of hear that full perspective,
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense, right?
It's really funny that you say that, scratching the surface with it, because I think the first time I ever scratched the surface with those
Hmm.
kind of questions was, I was, in a while ago, I was quite the gamer,
Okay.
and I had this headset that I would wear, and it didn't exactly feel comfortable, like sitting on my ears.
Yeah.
And I kept asking myself, I was like, man, like, why does it hurt to wear this headset? Like, it's not supposed to hurt when I wear this headset.
Right.
And I started kind of thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, wait a minute, why is it not supposed to hurt when I wear this headset? I was like, it's not like this headset was, I mean, the headset was built to fit on my ears, but my
Hmm.
ears weren't built to support this headset.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I kind of started like diving deeper into that, and I was like, you
Yeah.
know what, like, like I said, our genome has been forged over the past like 3.5 million years, right? So, in we're trying to, put these modern conveniences into our lifestyle to make up for whatever it may be. Like, food's more accessible, so now we
Hmm.
don't have to we don't have to like, hunt and gather for our food anymore. And it was just, that was my first kind of like dive into this evolutionary concept, and that was a little bit of a ramble there, but yeah, it was really a really interesting
Hmm.
perspective. Like I said, the evolutionary
Definitely.
perspective of health is definitely a very interesting perspective.
Definitely. Now, when it comes to coaching, is that the perspective that you're always coaching from, or does it kind of depend on the individual?
Yeah, so to an extent, it depends on the individual, but for the most part, that's always what I'm looking
Okay.
to coach someone towards, right? I don't do a ton of work with athletes. That's just not really where my passion is.
Okay.
And we can discuss where my passions lie a little bit deeper in a second here.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't work with a ton of athletes, but really, and we kind of come back to this idea of inventing exercise. Athletic sports are inventions, right? Human
Right.
inventions. We didn't, like maybe, like I said, hunters and gatherers were throwing things, but they weren't, throwing a rock at an animal, right? And then once that animal dropped over, they don't walk 60 feet, pick up the rock, walk back 60 feet, and throw it another 100 times.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm making a joke about pitching here.
Yeah.
So, hunters, that wasn't like something that we did, right? So this repetitive motion of athletes isn't exactly, it's something that we invented, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the athlete, it really depends on what season they're in, right? Are they in the season of their sport?
Yep.
In that case, they're going to sacrifice their health. There's no way around that, right? They're
Yeah.
going to lose out on a little bit of sleep. Their nutrition is going to be more performance driven, which might mean that your macronutrients are skewed. So you might not be getting the amount of like omega-3 DHAs that you need, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
The athlete is going to sacrifice their health for performance, and that's okay short term.
Yep.
When it comes to the off season, that's when, if I were to be their trainer, that's when we need to focus on, okay, you just threw that baseball as a pitcher, for an example. You just threw that baseball 1,000 times over the past 3-4 months,
Yep.
right? Let's rehab that shoulder so that way we don't experience an injury next season or make it a current injury even worse, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so it really depends there.
Okay.
Who the individual is and what time of their specific sport they're in
That makes sense.
for, right? Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think that's a good point to bring up that, unfortunately, if you are a high level athlete, your health will most likely always be sacrificed a bit during the season, right? Like I think sometimes we might have this misconception that like we can still maintain, perfect peak health while also competing at a high level, which it's not always the case. There has to be some give and take and some sacrifice. But I like what you said with, once that season's over, that's kind of when you then are going into how can we, now essentially repair the body, right?
yes, yeah. It's a constant state of um, damage the body and repair the body,
Yep.
damage the body, repair the body. That's back to that same analogy that we had with the with Christian Bale and
Hmm.
elite level performers. Like when he's getting ready for a movie, he's gonna go through that period of unhealthy lifestyle, and
Yeah,
then between movies, we're gonna rehabilitate and get you back to proper human health.
definitely. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
with that. Okay.
Okay. Okay. All
That
right.
makes
It's making
sense.
sense.
Yeah,
Makes
it's
sense.
clicking. It's starting to fire, and I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I see it.
Yeah. It took me a few years to kind of understand this, even
Yeah.
with my own training. I was one of those people for a while who was like, I have to be in the gym 7 days a week for two
Hmm.
hours at a time and just busting my butt the whole time,
Yeah.
to what, grow an extra inch on my biceps, like
Right.
in the long term, it doesn't really mean anything, you know. But so yeah, it took me a while to kind of realize that what does healthy actually mean, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm sure this is probably one of those questions that it could go so many different ways, but you just said, what does healthy actually mean to Dylan the coach? What does healthy mean? How would you define that or explain that to someone who might
That's a
not
that's a
know?
that's a very good question. Like you said, that this can go many different
Yeah.
ways. What does healthy mean? I don't know if I really have a good definition of what healthy means to me,
Okay.
but I know that I I'm in a healthy state if and then we can get even deeper into here into like, the specifics with your body specifically, but
Hmm.
when you wake up, how do you feel? Are you still tired? Do you feel well rested? That's a factor of your health.
Yep.
When it comes to just moving around throughout the day, how does your movement feel? Is it easy or is it difficult? When you take your shoulders through their own range of motion or you try to lift your arms above your head, do you feel restricted? Are you able to get there completely? Um, when you use the bathroom, like how long are you sitting on the toilet for? Like, and let's ask some other questions here. What's the consistency like? You know what I mean? Like these
Yeah.
are all going to be questions, that have to be asked when we discuss what does healthy mean. And then we can even get into a little bit more of the nutrition, right? Like
Yeah.
how different does your food look, right? Like, are you eating, I think a lot of times, we eat the same like three foods
Yeah.
all day long, right? And
Yeah.
it's just they're just in different shapes,
Yeah.
you know. But you see a lot of the same colors. Like, it doesn't matter how many different ways you cook a potato, it's still a potato,
Yeah.
you know. So we gotta, there's so many different questions that can define healthy, right?
Yeah.
And back to that evolutionary perspective of health, right?
Hmm.
I even kind of been dabbling around with this my own mind lately.
Yeah.
But like as the hunters and gatherers, right? They didn't health wasn't an objective. It was a byproduct of just survival,
Yeah.
right? And so it's I've kind of tried to relax a little bit on the objective of health. I'll put that in quotations. Uh,
Okay.
Relaxing on the objective of health in quotations there, because if I'm living my life as, say, a normal hunter and gatherer should, or if I try to compensate for not living that way the best that I can, health should be a byproduct of that. And what that would look like when it comes to nutrition, right, is going to be eating a diverse palate, right? You're going to have a
Yeah.
lot of different foods. You're not going to eat the same foods every day. So I
Right.
try to, I try to change up what I'm eating. Maybe one day I eat a lot of fish. The next day I'm eating a lot of chicken. Every day I'm trying to eat a diverse amount of vegetables or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I don't eat any meat at all. Maybe the next day I fast for 3 hours when I wake up. Whatever it may be, I've been trying to relax and just kind of like listen to my body and see,
Hmm.
you know, what is it suggesting? What is it asking for today? It's a really, really interesting way to think about it.
I love that. That's something that just, I mean, I don't have nearly, the background or the knowledge that Dylan has, but like for me in my everyday life, as I've gotten older, I've kind of been like, what does the body, need? What is my body telling me today? Like maybe I have this workout regimen, but today my body says it needs some rest. Or, with
Right.
nutrition, maybe, I'm on this nutrition plan where I'm eating a certain amount of calories and macros, but you know, I'm still a little hungry, so like let's eat a little more. Like let's lower, carbs for today and see how that makes me feel. So I love that you kind of said that perspective of just like we all kind of could take some more time to just be more in tune with our bodies and listen to it
Hmm.
more.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And it's a very difficult thing to do,
Yeah.
it's like, well, of course I know what I feel like, but we don't realize that we don't know what we feel like until we learn how to figure out what we feel like.
Right.
It's a really weird, it's almost like a paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
Like even myself and throughout my own journey, actually we'll get a little bit of a backstory here, and I'm surprised it came up this late in the podcast here.
Yeah.
Um, but I believe you know this, right? I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 13 years old,
Yeah. Yep.
and for a while I thought that like the chronic pain that I was feeling as a result of my diagnosis, I thought that that was just like normal. Everyone had back pain when they were in high school. I
Yeah.
thought that was normal for me. I thought, like my joints being achy all the time was normal for just the human experience, right?
Hmm.
I thought this kind of stuff was normal, and then I realized I started working out, I started doing some yoga, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, like my joints no longer feel achy and sore. Like I don't really have back pain when I do stuff like this. And then it kind of like started to bring that like awareness factor as a paradigm shift. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't have to feel like crap all the time. That's not the human experience. And then, I started changing the way I ate, and I was like, oh, wow, man, it feels really good to eat, maybe like some broccoli after I work out
Hmm.
rather than a Tim Hortons breakfast sandwich. And I
Right.
started to play around with that kind of awareness, and it just snowballs. And then I always like to use the example, Morpheus from the Matrix when
Yeah.
he's offering Neo the blue pill and the red pill, right?
Yep.
And I took that, the red pill, right? It's the red pill. I took the red pill, and
Yeah.
now I know way more than I ever wanted to
Right.
know. And there's no going back.
Definitely. And I mean, for anyone listening, just a little quick background. Dylan and I, we've known each other, geez, how long has it even been?
Oh, a while.
Like,
It's been at least 10
yeah, I was
years.
gonna say, like, it sounds crazy, but it has to be at
Yeah.
least 10,
Yeah,
10,
at
like
least
12
10
years or
years.
something.
Yeah, 10, something like
So,
that.
yeah, I mean, just as friends and just kind of seeing you go through your journey, like I'll be the first to say, like, I've seen Dylan all over the place, like trying different things, like going from like I'm, like you said, like you mentioned earlier, lifting 7 days a week for 2 hours a day, to maybe not doing as much strength and doing more like mobility and flexibility. And like now I've seen him recently kind of going into like, doing things with like body weight and,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
even really lifting like, plates of
Yeah,
of weight
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
More calisthenics based.
Yeah.
Actually, I really enjoy the calisthenics training.
Yeah.
I don't do it, so I haven't been training a ton lately. I got other things going on right
Right.
now. Um, but I really enjoy it because it challenges your mobility,
Yeah.
um, which I think is, we can get into that in a little bit here as well. But I really enjoyed the mobility challenge as well as just the efficiency of it all,
Yeah.
right? Like before when, you're more into like the bodybuilding scene, or doing that style of training,
Hmm.
you spend 2 hours working on like your chest and your triceps.
Right.
Like I, I start trying to work on doing some like handstands and handstand push-ups and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And dude, like 10 minutes later, I'm toast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's extremely efficient. And, if your goal is to increase the size of your muscles, maybe you do want to spend a little bit more time increasing the individual volume of all
Right.
those different, lines of tissue. But if your goal is to, live like a human and experience what it's like to be a human, it's that's all about efficiency. Let's
Exactly.
let's get things done, but let's also be able to do it multiple times throughout the day.
Right. No, I love that. And now, Dylan, like, something you kind of brought up very briefly was, passions, what you're passionate about. You're a guy I know that's passionate about many different things. What's, maybe current passions, or
Current
what's
passions.
your like focus at right now, just
Yeah.
like with
eh,
you?
okay, so I think it's been a little bit of a, I kind of touched on it just previously there. It's been a snowballing effect, for a few years now. Like I said, when I
Hmm.
first started working out, it was, I noticed that like when I worked out, I felt better. My joints
Yeah.
felt better. I felt more comfortable in my own skin.
Yep.
Um, and then I started doing yoga, and that helped for a while. And I was almost like, the way I said I was training, I was very neurotic about the way I was doing yoga. It was every single day I was
Yeah.
doing an hour of yoga, on top of like my 1 to 2 hours of weightlifting, right? So my training day was extensive.
Yeah.
And so that was, providing me with some relief. And then I, came across, I was actually, due to another trainer that I was working with, at my previous gym. She got certified in, a system called functional range conditioning. So
Okay.
that Dr. Andrea Ospina, the evolutionary perspective of health guy, he created this system, functional range systems, and functional range
Okay.
conditioning is one of the branches of that. And what functional range conditioning is it's the most scientifically proven way to increase joint control
Okay.
and joint range of motion. And so what functional range conditioning is it's the introduction to all of that. So we learn about things that are called CARs, and CARs stands for controlled articular rotations.
Okay.
And when you see, you may have seen these on my Instagram,
Yep.
other people may have seen them somewhere, but they just look like joint circles.
Hmm.
But they're joint circles with a lot of intention. It's learning about if I can learn how to move my shoulder without any other joint in my body moving, then that is the purest demonstration of what Dylan's shoulder can actually do. And
Okay.
then if I take you through, and there's one of these cars for every single joint in their body.
Okay.
If I take you through your cervical spine car, so the cervical spine car is the 7 vertebrae that are in your neck.
Hmm.
So if I take you through your cervical spine car, and I see that when you do your cervical spine car, your shoulders kind of pull up into the air. Maybe your knees bend, your hips start doing some weird things. You start bending at the torso. I see that all those compensations that are occurring are, number one, a sign of inappropriate joint coupling, which means that your shoulders are trying to be a cervical spine, and your
Okay.
shoulders are not as good at being a cervical spine as your cervical spine is,
Right.
right? It makes a lot of sense there, and
Yeah.
then it shows me that there's something that's going on, right? Your shoulder isn't able to do something, so then the rest of your body starts to make up for it, which is a really, really cool thing that the human body can do.
Right.
But also, you know, we don't want to rely on those compensatory patterns.
Right.
So if we can make your cervical spine better at being a cervical spine, then anything that you have to do with your cervical spine will get better just by that fact,
Yeah.
right? If I make your shoulder better at being a shoulder, then when you do your shoulder press, you're gonna perform a shoulder press better.
Right.
If I make your shoulder a better shoulder, you're gonna throw a baseball better.
Yeah.
Insert example, improving the function of that joint is gonna improve that example 100%. 100%. And so that's what I've really gotten into, and that's
Okay.
what my major passion is right now. Is it's joint specific strength training, or just really, really high level mobility training.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned, I've definitely seen, out on social media, Instagram, you're posting about things like mobility and the joints specifically, and I think that's interesting because, you know, even probably prior to getting into coaching and everything, similarly to me, back when we first met in high school and stuff, we were working out
Hmm.
and stuff, but I think we just like lifted with that mentality of how much weight can we heft up,
Right,
and
right.
thinking about like actual like individual joints, like when you said shoulders
Yes.
and stuff, I was like, wow, that like just in that moment that resonated with me. Like,
Yeah,
like maybe that's
yeah.
how what I need to do to get stronger at shoulder press, not like, some sort of,
Right.
just keep
So
pushing it.
we'll dive a little bit deeper into movement
Yeah.
here, and this is kind of like we're going to circle all the way back to this evolutionary perspective of health. Maybe
Okay.
maybe I brought that up too early. Maybe we'll probably lose a few listeners because they're going to be like, "What is this guy talking about?" Now it's all going to make sense. I
Okay.
promise.
Bring us home.
Yeah, bring it home, bring it home. But so like I said, when you can take your shoulder, we'll take your left arm out here for an example, and you can point your thumb up straight into the air, right?
Okay.
Well, now rotate your whole shoulder until that thumb goes forward and then it points down, right? So that's what we're going to call internal rotation, right? Now, when you're doing overhead shoulder press, you're not exactly training that internal rotation.
Right.
Now, the inverse of that internal rotation, we rotate it back, that's going to be called external rotation. When we do that shoulder press, you're also not externally rotating your shoulder, right?
Right.
We're only taking the shoulder through flexion and extension when we do a shoulder press.
Right.
And if you look at a lot of different movements that you see in the gym, like shoulder presses or pull ups, which is going to be a vertical movement of the shoulder,
Yep.
we look at bench presses and rowing style movements, that's going to be a horizontal movement pattern for the shoulder and the elbow. And, it's all flexion and extension. And we see squats and we see deadlifts. Doesn't matter what exercise program you see out there, I'll bet you that exercise program is founded on those 4 movement patterns:
Yeah.
vertical, horizontal, pushing slash pulling, and then squatting and hinging.
Yep.
Every single exercise program you'll see, they don't touch on rotation, and rotation is like the forgotten component of our joints. So, and to tie it all home, like those hunters and gatherers, they didn't set up, when they had to squat for things, they
Yeah.
didn't set up where their feet were about shoulder width apart. Their feet are kind of spread out at about a 45-degree angle with each foot, and then they squat down and they made sure their knees didn't go past their toes. Like, no, that's not how we squatted,
Right.
for a majority of our existence. We just kind of realized that, oh, I need to get down on the ground. I'm just going to get down on the ground the fastest way possible. And whether that's, leaning more over the right leg because that's where the object is that you need to pick up,
Yep.
that's what happened, right? So we need to be able to express our joints in these full ranges of motion. And that's, you know, really where I come back to. And I totally just rambled there. I totally forgot your question. I should have wrote it down. um, yeah. So that's, yeah, that it's really, it's almost intuitive once you start to hear about it,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, you kind of had that little epiphany when I was talking about the shoulders performance.
Mm-hmm.
And we see a lot, like I was saying, you see a lot of movements in the gym. They're all flexion and extension,
Yeah.
but they're missing that rotational component. That rotational component is so important for our joints. And you might ask me, why is that so important for our joints? Well,
Yep.
your shoulder rotates, doesn't it?
Yeah.
3.5 million years of evolution tell us that it's important that your shoulder rotates then,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very, very complex
Yeah.
training that we can get into from there, but it also becomes very simple because then it's basically founded on principles.
Okay. So like now I'm thinking about shoulders specifically. That's kind of the example we've
Okay.
been running with. Like
hmm
you mentioned kind of the movements of shoulder press or pull up, stuff like that.
hmm
Now, are those kind of lifts, are they essentially harmful at times because you're not getting the rotation, or you just want to do both? Make sure you're getting the rotation while you're also doing those vertical movements.
Okay. So those are patterns.
Okay.
Those are patterns, and we want to be able to practice our patterns. But, and I guess this is maybe what I meant to touch on there, and I
Oh,
apologize,
it's okay.
a little scattered here. But when we train, ultimately our main objective is to be training tissue, right?
Yeah.
Tissue meaning your connective tissue that's connecting your bones to your muscles, like the tendons and the ligaments, or your bones to your bones, ligaments specifically. You have fascia, you have muscle, you have all this different tissue. We're just going to call it stuff, tissue,
Okay.
right? So we're training lines of tissue. If you're always doing a bicep curl the same way, you're always training that tissue in the same direction. If you're always doing a pull up in the same way, you're never changing the position of your hands. You're always training those tissues in the same way. And so those tissues are going to get really good at moving in that pattern. But if we change them, all of a sudden they become weaker.
Okay.
So the idea is that we want to be able to practice. Those are what I would call patterns. Like the pull up is a pattern, the
Okay.
overhead press is a pattern, the bench press is a pattern. If we get really good at patterns, then that's all our tissues are really good at, is
Yeah.
those specific patterns. But if we train our joints in those rotational components and then also those flexion and extension components and those abduction and adduction components,
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot, I know. If we create strong joints in like all of those ranges of motion,
Yeah.
then those specific tissues we're not going to have to worry about it, because when you rotate your shoulder, you're going to access a lot more tissue than you would if
Mm.
you're just flexing and extending. If you're really working on flexion of the shoulder in multiple different planes, then you don't have, it's going to carry over to whatever pattern it is that you're looking at. So
Yeah.
to answer your question about is it detrimental to be doing those things, I would say no, unless you're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
So if we kind of look at what leads to injuries,
Mm-hmm.
right? We look at all non-contact related injuries are a result of repetitive movement,
Yeah.
right? So you see people who, throw a baseball
Yeah.
all the time, that motion occurring, thousands of times over the life over a lifetime. Eventually that shoulder just gives out because of that
Yeah.
repetitive motion. The shoulder got really good at doing one thing,
Yeah.
but not very good at doing all the other things that the shoulder can do,
Right.
right? So if we teach the shoulder how to be a shoulder, then throwing a baseball becomes better. If we teach the shoulder how to be a shoulder, then a pull up becomes easier. If we teach the shoulder how to be a shoulder, bench press becomes easier, right? Does that kind of make sense? Does that clarify anything?
It does, yeah, because I think, we focus on teaching the shoulder how to overhead press, teaching the shoulder how
Right.
to rotate a baseball. But like you said, we need to teach a shoulder how to properly be a shoulder, meaning it functions the way that it's intended to and how it always has, like
Yeah,
evolutionarily.
definitely,
Okay.
definitely, definitely.
Okay. The
Yeah.
the lights are flickering on in the brain.
Okay. Okay. I hope it is for everyone at home too, because sometimes it's difficult here, especially because, it's audio only.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can tell, I don't know if my mic's picking it up, but I'm like moving around as I'm trying to do this stuff. Like
Right.
normally I work better in the in-person setting, or
Yeah.
like some way I can demonstrate some things, so it's a little bit more difficult with the audio only. I hope the message is coming through to people.
Definitely. And, I think that brings up kind of a good point. I know that kind of off the record, you and I have talked recently, and it sounds like there's maybe some things in the works, maybe even some like sort of video content coming out. Are you able to talk about any maybe projects or things that you're working on?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about this kind of stuff. So I don't know when I'll have everything said and done. I'm hoping it's actually going to be here pretty soon, definitely before this podcast goes live and airs out. Um, but I'm putting together a YouTube channel so I can start to explain these concepts a little bit more clearly so that they make sense for people,
Okay.
and a little bit more systematically. So, and I guess this uh, kind of branches into like my overall project and why I really became a trainer was, I told you I didn't really, athletes weren't they weren't, they're not my passion, right? My
Right.
passion is teaching people how to just be better at being a human,
Yeah.
right? So along with that, I never wanted to really, I don't, you may have been one of these individuals in the past for me, but I never really wanted to really charge people for training advice. It's just
Hmm.
I'm passionate about it and I'm really good at it. So I figured, why don't I make some money doing this? But when I first started this, really before I even became a trainer, I was texting people routines on a regular basis. I was
Right.
texting people meal plans on a regular basis just for free because I loved educating people about this kind of stuff. I love talking to people through this, and that's ultimately my primary goal is I want people to be able to get this information for free.
Yeah.
I think there's too many sources out there that are shoving, inappropriate information
Yep.
down our throats and turning us into crappier human beings, not in the moral sense, but in the literal sense. Like
Yeah.
we're no longer good at being human because of all this stuff that's going on. Whether it's like sitting on the couch watching TV all day, or you're driving past a fast food restaurant on your way home. It's just too accessible to become an unhealthy human. So
Right.
making I want to make being a healthy human much more accessible for people. So the first place that I'm starting with that is going to be YouTube.
Okay.
So I'll be creating a YouTube channel, and from there educating people on what it's like to move your shoulder and what it's like to move your knee, and because we can go into every joint. We just went deep on the shoulder here.
Right. I love that.
And that's
And
where it starts.
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great starting point, and I love that. And, I will definitely go on the record and say that Dylan, he knows what he's talking about. Like I've talked to him extensively about these kind of things, just for fun or just even like, hey, like I'm experiencing this discomfort, with a certain joint or whatever, or like I'm trying, this kind of nutrition plan. Like, what's your thoughts on it? So he definitely knows what he's talking about. And I think, you brought up a good point that, the way the world is now, it's easy to fall into those unhealthy habits or behaviors. And it's not,
Right.
anyone's fault per se. It's just,
Right.
convenience or, efficiency, whatever. But I like that you want to use a platform to spread, positive and good health, behaviors and really reinforce the idea behind those.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. That's I think that's really where my passion
Yeah.
lies, and that's always been my goal. So I think that's what I'm going to continue working on, is figuring out how I can, you know, help people become the healthiest they can, just we're already paying way too much for education. You don't need to
Hmm.
pay me $500 a month to help you do it, right?
Right.
Like, the odds are already stacked in the favor of you becoming unhealthy.
Yeah.
I don't want to contribute to that,
Right.
right? I want to make being healthy as accessible as possible. Um, and along with that, it just so anyone knows where my educational space comes from, or like my reasoning for
Hmm.
the way I teach, I guess I should say, is, early on when I became a trainer, my whole goal was to make it to where, after you train with me for 6 months, you no longer need me as a trainer. After that, I should have been able to teach you everything you know to go on and be successful in your journey of health. I have since changed that goal. Now I want you to train with me for a year, but after a year, you should be able to go to any gym in a 10-mile radius and you should be able to be the best trainer in that facility.
I
That's
love
my new
that.
goal.
I love
Yeah.
that. That's a really good way to look at it. And I think that that's, just from knowing you personally, that you're all about providing value. How can I
Hmm.
provide value to others? How can I change people's lives and, make someone who does not have the same credentials as you just from training and spending time learning from you with the information you can provide
Hmm.
almost like they're getting certified, in a sense,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yeah. My certification process, it took me a certain length of time. It
Yeah.
might take you a little bit longer when I'm teaching it to you,
Hmm.
but after a year or two, you'll have that, unofficial certification.
I love that. There we go. The
Yeah,
Dylan
yeah.
Elgas certification.
Exactly. Yeah, it might take you a little bit longer. It'll be a little bit cheaper,
Yeah,
but hey, you'll get there.
definitely. Now for, anyone,
Without even realizing it,
yeah,
without even realizing it. You didn't even know, and then all of a sudden you're gonna finish up with a whole new personal training certification.
exactly. I love that. So, Dylan, for anyone that's listening, and again, this is one of those questions where I'm sure you could take it so many different ways, but just, for like a casual person, if they hear this and they're like, I want to get, better and better health, what's some things that they could do, like simple everyday
Hmm.
things, whether it's you want to take
Hmm.
that nutritional wise, exercise,
Hmm.
movement, recovery, just some basic things that anyone can do.
Hmm. So, like you said, this was a very variable
Yeah.
question. And we'll have plenty of time to talk more about the other facets of this. But in my experience, I think the lowest hanging fruit for people, or the easiest domino to knock over, is that exercise or movement domino.
Okay.
Um, and I've noticed, and you tell me if your experience has been similar. But like I said, for me, my first introduction to this industry was through, my fitness and changing
Hmm.
changing the way I, perceive exercise and the way I move and different things like that. And
Yep.
I found a lot of people, it's the easiest way to get into it, and the nutrition is, nutrition and sleep easily come along with that,
Yeah.
because they help support that training goal. Like, training can be fun, right? And you
Yep.
want to continue to do it. So nutrition makes that a little bit easier and you get more results from it.
Yep.
So that would always be maybe my first recommendation for people.
Okay.
But also, if you're someone who works, like a crazy work week, like a 60-hour work week, my first suggestion for that, you don't have time, you got kids, you're working 60 hours, you don't have time to hit the gym every day or whatever it is. From there, it's, maybe spend a little time getting mindful. We didn't really talk about much else than training, but we can also, talk about, maybe focusing on the sleep for that individual
Yeah.
is going to be beneficial. It really depends on what's currently going on in an individual's life. And that's, I think that's where, like, the coaching really becomes beneficial.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, we've touched heavily on the training aspect and the physical aspect, but talk a little bit about the mental and the mindset if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, okay. So where do we even begin?
Right.
um, so and correct me, you can kind of steer this ship if you
Yeah.
want, but what you mean here by, like, the mental and the physical, is like the idea of starting a health journey. Is that what we're kind of discussing here?
Yeah, or just how like, the mental side impacts your health in probably
Oh,
more
the mental side
ways. Yeah,
impacts.
in more
Okay.
ways than
Yeah,
we
yeah.
may
No, that's
realize.
that's extremely powerful. And and not to beat a dead horse here, but again, going back to that evolutionary perspective of health, we have, like, these, so many like mental health complications going
Hmm.
on, today, and I think it's at the same time we can circle back. So what are we naturally selected to do? We're naturally selected to move and eat well,
Yep.
probably have some sex and party at a bonfire. Like that's what we're meant to do,
Yeah.
and we're not doing that anymore. So it makes sense that we're no longer, you know, experiencing the same like brain chemistry that we would
Yeah.
living in that environment, right? So in my own experience, I've had those bouts of depression, especially
Mm.
after my diagnosis, in my like early teenage or my mid teenage years. And then I didn't start figuring some things out until I was about 18, 19 years old. And up until then, I was struggling with bouts of depression, and training has definitely helped kind of turn that around. And for me specifically, I don't know if it was the confidence that training built and the confidence that eating better built, or if it was the just helping people and achieve their goals. And even if it was me just texting someone a back and biceps routine
Yeah.
when I was 18 years old, and they saw some success from it and had fun, maybe them giving me that feedback is what started to turn around my mental health. Or maybe it was the confidence that I gained from doing my own training.
Yeah.
That one's a very interesting question, because I think it hits us all in different ways, right?
Right.
It takes a different amount of time. It's a different set of factors. That one can be totally chemically related. So your sleep and your nutrition could have a major influence over how you perform mentally.
Yeah.
Or it could be all physical, the way that you see your self image. And so then in that case, training is going to have a big influence on it. Or there's so many different, it could be the relationships that you have in your life. So it's that one's that's another podcast right there,
Right.
Zach.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely. It's I think, there's a lot we could take with it. And like you said, that's a whole nother discussion. But I think, the gist that I'm getting from you is that the mental health is just as important as our physical health. And it's something that sometimes gets neglected, but they really, to fully be a healthy human, you need the harmony of both of them working together.
Exactly, exactly. And it's a term called, or I guess it's two words, so
Hmm.
it's maybe not one term, but embodied cognition. If you haven't heard of this before, it's just, I mean, it's gonna make sense when you've heard it, but it's the word for basically knowing that the brain and the mind are connected.
Yeah.
Or sorry, the brain and the body are connected, or the brain and the mind and the body are connected. So, if you're feeling sluggish, chances are it's going to be very difficult to exercise. But
Hmm.
if you're feeling sluggish and you go out for a walk, there's a good chance that that movement is going to cause some chemical reaction in the brain to help boost your confidence and get you more excited for movement. And we can use this to our advantage. So if we're in uh, a funk, right, and we don't
Yep.
really want to do anything, sometimes getting some gentle movement in is going to help you know lift your spirits up, right? Or even if it's the other way around, like you really want to work out like in a mental space, but your body's just feeling, a little fatigued. Sometimes like doing like brain exercises can help give you that sense of you accomplish something
Yeah.
physical. And from there you might you know what I mean, that might aid you in that recovery process, so that way you don't have to feel so bad about not training your physical self
Right.
because you trained your mental self. And then that you know isn't going to lead to a spiral effect of you no longer training, so then now you get a little bummed out about not training as often and being harder on yourself because you're not training as consistently as you should. And you fall, because I think a lot of us fall victim to that rabbit hole right
Yeah.
there, right? So it's being aware that these two entities really are connected, and they have so much power over one another that maybe if we just shift our perspective a little bit, we can kind of influence the other one a little bit more,
Yeah. Definitely.
if that makes
It
sense.
makes a lot of sense to me, and it really resonates with me. I mean, just thinking about my personal journey, from a physical and mental health standpoint, like when they're both firing, that's when I feel the best, right? Like, we just need
Right, it
that
feels
combination.
great.
Yeah, for sure.
And then if it like one's not feeling it, then it's really easy for the other one to kind of like domino
Yeah.
effect, right? Like if your body's just feeling sluggish, like achy,
Hmm.
it's really easy for you to get in that state where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna sit on the couch and eat potato chips all day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas like if you can kind of recognize that effect is happening, or that, that reaction is occurring, maybe you can, let's do something that stimulates the brain, and
Yeah.
maybe that will get us through this achy body period of time.
Definitely. It sounds like what you're saying, just like the awareness, having that awareness of
Yes.
ourselves and our
Hmm.
bodies and our states, whether that's mental, physical, just like knowing ourselves.
Hmm.
I love that.
Certainly.
Awesome.
Certainly.
Now, this is a little of me putting you on the spot a bit. We didn't talk about this or anything to anyone that's listening, but would you be open to maybe like a quick little like activity, if you will?
Ooh.
Maybe see what it is?
Who's leading? Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
okay, you're leading the activity?
No,
Okay,
you
I'll do it.
well,
Yeah.
you're kind of leading it, but
Oh,
basically what I
okay.
was thinking is, for the people listening to have maybe more of a tangible example and also to maybe see kind of Dylan's
Okay.
process, let's use me as an example. If you and I were
Okay.
talking, like, and you can ask me any questions you want, like, what would you suggest for me to start focusing on to like better my overall health? Um,
Ooh.
like kind of like
Ooh, okay.
a consultation, if you will.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So number one, I would ask you, what are your goals? Not even training specific, but
Hmm.
just life specific. What are your goals?
To be, to have good health, to, you know, be in good shape and good health and live a long life, to, you know, help out, my family, friends and make experiences with them and to feel confident in my own body.
Okay. And what does your current exercise, or what does your current schedule look like? What does your day to day look like?
Yeah, so right now I'm a full-time graduate student, so have classes, homework, all that good stuff. Also working part-time while I'm going through school. So, maybe 20 hours a week working, and then more of like the health fitness space. I try to get at least 10,000 steps every day. I work out, do like an intense workout 3 days a week, and try to do some sort of, yoga, stretching, um, a little bit each day, at least like 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day.
Okay. And so yoga and stretching 15 to 10 minutes a day. What do those intense training sessions look like?
Yeah, so probably similar to a lot of people with the current situation in the world and how it's been over the last year. I've shifted more towards calisthenics, just being at home instead of at a gym.
Hmm.
So really for me,
Hmm.
it's just a lot of body weight things, um, throwing on like a weighted backpack for me to
Hmm.
maybe make
Hmm.
movements a little tougher and just trying to hit the major muscle groups, chest, legs, back, shoulders.
Right, right. Okay. And then how would you describe your nutrition? If you could give me, it doesn't have to be too extensive,
Hmm.
but how would you describe what your nutrition looks like?
Yeah, I would say I kind of have this like 80-20 philosophy where it's like 80% I'm trying to eat, quote unquote, like, healthy foods or better foods for you. And then, 20% of the time, I I'll eat a candy bar, some chocolate, whatever. It's all
Hmm.
about enjoying
Hmm.
life too. And I try to stick with the daily caloric intake that I've calculated out, and then hit certain amount of macros. I like to focus on protein mainly for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then would you say there's a specific diet that you subscribe to, like vegan, paleo, pescatarian, whatever, keto?
No, I'm typically I guess I mean if you want to call it like an anabolic diet, just with a priority of protein and
Right, right.
that's the
Okay.
main thing. But I guess you would call it a diet technique. I guess I do intermittent fasting.
Okay. Yes, you do fast.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm jotting this stuff
Oh
down.
no, take your time.
And then how about your sleep? What does your sleep look like? Do you have like a bedtime? Do you wake up at the same time every day? Do you wake up in the middle of the night? Is that a regular occurrence?
Yeah, so I I typically, I feel like this sounds a little bad, but I typically go to sleep maybe around anywhere between like midnight and 1:30 at like the latest, 1 in the morning. But I usually sleep till about 9. So anywhere from maybe on a bad night 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Unfortunately, I do wake up throughout the night. I would say maybe once or twice I'll wake up. Sometimes, get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, whatever. But sometimes I just like wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, I can't really fall back to sleep. And it takes, maybe 5 minutes before I can doze back off.
Okay, and so we're getting a little bit of spoilers to if we were ever to do a sequel to this podcast, but
Yeah.
are you using like what is your pre-sleep ritual look like? Do you have one? What do you
Ooh,
do before you go to bed?
good question. So, um, I try to, I'm big on kind of like the blue light wave, so I try to avoid, blue
Okay.
light.
Okay.
Um,
You're woke to the blue
Yep.
light.
So I try to avoid, screens and stuff like that. Of course, the usual, brush your teeth, do all that good stuff, maybe set out, stuff for the next day. But I like to just kind of, try to get in a relaxed state. I typically don't eat, a few hours before bed, let it kind of digest before I get ready to wind down, and then just try to do some calming things. When I first hit, the bed, I'll do some kind of deep breathing, and even like I carry a lot of
Okay.
tension in my shoulders. So like intentionally like
Okay.
lowering the shoulders at the end of the night, I feel like helps me like
Yeah, yeah, there you
relax.
go. Okay, interesting. So to be honest, Zach, I don't see a ton of red
Okay.
flags. So you're making this one difficult for me, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
I do enjoy a challenge, but so this is probably a point where if you were coming to see me as a coach, I would really need to see like an assessment for your movement
Okay.
because I think that would be my first area to address. I guess the other question that I could ask you about your nutrition. Um, would be, and we could this again. This is a
Yep.
sequel or a spoiler for a
Yeah.
sequel. Like I could ask you about what types. Like, do you know at all if you're in if you have an intake of um, prebiotic and probiotic bacteria?
I don't.
You don't. Do you eat a lot of fermented food?
No.
Okay, so that might be an interesting area that we can touch
Okay.
on a later podcast or a later time to talk. But that would be something that I might suggest to you.
Okay.
Do you eat a lot of fish, fatty fish like tuna, salmon?
I can't remember the last time I had fish.
Okay. Okay, so that might be another area
Yeah.
that I might help you, or we might
Yeah.
discuss. And then I guess we could also talk about your performance in school. Like, do you feel like your mental acuity, do you feel like it's there? Do you feel like you're always just like sharp and ready for whatever assignment gets thrown at you, or do you think it kind of takes you a little bit of a minute to kind of get in the zone for studying and stuff like that?
Oh man, I think it's one of those things that it kind of varies. I think generally I feel kind of sharp, throughout the day, but I
Okay.
definitely think there's those times, and maybe this goes back to what we are talking about with like having that like mental and physical like duality. Sometimes I just feel a little off, and like it does take a little extra time to focus.
Okay. 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 Yeah. So, like I said, not a ton of red flags. I'd say the biggest red flag for me is the lack of fatty fish.
Okay.
That's a whole topic for another
Yep.
time. But relating to DHA and EPA, omega-3 fatty acids, and how they, they form structural fats
Yeah.
in our brain. That's the quick little teaser there. So everyone, if you're listening, go ahead and take your fish oil supplement and eat some more salmon. It's important, I promise. But so if you came in to see me and you were looking to just generally overall improve your performance, and I use that term not in the athletic sense. I
Hmm.
use that term as like, we're humans. We need to perform like humans should.
Yep.
So I would then, like I said, there's no real red flags for me here in our little consultation. So I would take you through a movement screen,
Okay.
and I would take that cars that I was those cars that I was telling you about.
Yeah.
There's a full body routine for the cars that will be up on the YouTube channel that I will have by the time this podcast goes live,
Yep.
and what cars is going to help me do is assess your joints and what it'll give me the most purest raw form of what Zach can do with his body, and from there we would start addressing those deficits.
Okay. I like that. Awesome. Well, hey, I mean, it's good to know that you don't see any major red flags. I appreciate that. But
Yeah, no, not a ton of red
good.
flags. Maybe shift the bedtime a little
Yeah.
bit. That the sleep, the interruptions in sleep
Hmm.
is the only maybe like yellow flag that I'm seeing.
Okay.
And I think the conversation to figure out the cause of that would have to be a lot
Yeah,
longer. Um, and I don't know if we have time and to get through all that one. That one's a longer
for
discussion.
sure. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
appreciate you kind of walking through this, example and consultation. I hope to anyone listening, this kind of gives you just like a little glimpse at the way that Dylan kind of thinks through things and how he works with his clients as a coach. I like I said, you're very knowledgeable on everything, and to kind of see you in action, it's really cool for me to see too, and just to
Thank
get
you.
a better grasp of the way that you're taking, the journey that you're taking your clients through, I
Right.
guess would be a good way to
Yeah.
put it.
I appreciate that.
Of
I
course.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I think Dylan put out a good point. We could have many more talks and conversations and episodes. So
Yeah, there could be a lot.
yeah.
There could be a lot.
So I mean there's definitely a lot more. I would say we scratched the surface and got pretty into a lot of good stuff here. But
Yeah, you got a little bit of an introduction to who I am,
yeah,
and then we touched on mobility a little bit, and we could go even way deeper into that stuff next time
yeah,
too.
definitely. And I mean, anytime you want to come back, you're always welcome. And I definitely think we should
Of
do like
course.
a part two, maybe even just a
Yeah.
continuing series and see how far we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Certainly.
But
Certainly. I like that idea.
awesome. But is there anything that you want to, leave people with, like any last thoughts, or if anyone wants to connect with you, where they can find you on, social media or maybe the YouTube, what it might be called or anything like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So currently, I think the best place that you can find me is just at Dylan Elgas on Instagram. From there, in the future, as I kind of get things rolling with YouTube and other social medias, I'll link, the ones that are related to that through my Instagram. But that's the social media platform that I am most active on is Instagram. And then, I'm always here to give people advice. Like I said, I'd do
Hmm.
this for free if I had the option to. So anytime, shoot me a DM. I'm always going to be receptive. And my message for everyone is just, like, just kind of start to evaluate that evolutionary perspective of health, because that was a game changer for me.
Yeah.
That one really was a game changer for me. Kind of start to evaluate, okay, how am I feeling? And maybe there's a really interesting PBS series on YouTube
Okay.
if you got a couple hours to kill, about like the evolution of humans. And I really think evolutionary biology is fascinating. So
Yeah.
if you're looking to learn a little bit more about our species, because I think it's very important. How can we begin to start assessing the human body if we don't know what the human body
Right.
is? Right. So check out PBS's series on YouTube. It's called like Eons, like the evolution of humans or something like that.
Okay.
It's really cool stuff. Um, but other than that, yeah, you can find me on social media at Dylan Elgas.
Perfect. And on Instagram at Dylan Elgas, I'll put it, in the description and everything, but that's
Right.
Dylan, then Elgas, Elgas, all one word, right?
Yes, sir. I believe it is all one word. Yes, let me double check. I should have wrote that down. I meant to. Uh, no, it's underscore. So
Okay.
Dylan underscore
Hey,
Elgas.
Dylan. Yeah,
DYLAN underscore ELGAS. I
perfect.
apologize.
No problem. And I mean, again, I'll put that in like the description and everything of this
Yep.
this episode. But everyone that's listening, go check out Dylan. Whether you have questions or want to work with him or just see what he puts out, it's always great stuff. And just really bright mind on this kind of stuff. And Dylan, I have no doubt, whatever you do, you're gonna bring a lot of value to the health industry, and I change a lot of lives along the way. So thank you
I
for
appreciate
for
that.
setting out on this journey.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you for inviting me on the show
Of
here.
course, yeah, thanks so much. And we'll definitely have you back for a part two. But thank you so much, Dylan, for your time.